Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, a show about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours wants to record 1,000 loiners over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be loads of different things, to be honest with you. I think my earliest memory of thinking about what I wanted to be was looking at my parents and thinking, I don't understand what they do. Looks like it might be boring. What's a mad thing that I could be doing? And the only thing I could come up with at that time was like a hot air balloon driver. And obviously it's so irrelevant to what I do, but I think what my brain was trying to think of is what else is there? Or what's different or what's exciting.
Yeah.
So I think I always held on to a little bit of just looking for something that felt a little bit different that I knew must exist, but I couldn't quite see. So I kind of started with that thinking, and then I thought originally I might want to do something with children. My parents also worked with children, and I just love kids. And then I had a kind of epiphany when I went to my first music festival, where I just found it so incredibly exciting, not just the actual experience, but just seeing people who are working on it, thinking, what are they doing? What's this backstage business? So kind of drifted into events and the kind of backstage world. And then, I've had so many different career changes. So I feel like the most recent kind of career that I'm branching into is film. And that was definitely kind of sparked by just love of watching old movies at home alone on TCM channel. So yeah, I think that's the kind of route generally that I've taken, but it's been a bit of a mismatch.
What was the festival?
Oh God. First festival, Leeds Fest.
Was it?
Yeah, the classic.
I mean, it's on your doorstep, though.
Well, I was in Liverpool, so.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
So was that what drew you to Leeds? It was coming to a festival, and now you've ended up here.
The first time, yeah, I came to Leeds a couple of times. I came to see Daft Punk as well. That was kind of it was always big events that brought me here. Really.
Was that the Harewood House one?
No, it was it was the festival. Was it Wireless Festival? It was.
Right. Yeah. With the amazing one with the pyramid.
Oh my God. I couldn't believe, that's probably,
awesome.
It's one of the last times that they were touring, wasn't it? And we were all in tears, very emotional.
It was phenomenal. We met this, we were in a group and we met this Japanese woman that was sort of there on her own. And we're all like, we're being protective of her and stuff. And then Daft Punk came on and she had this big coat on and she just threw it off and she's in this like tiny disco outfit. She just goes mental. And it was like, wow, that was a good start to this. That was a great gig. Yeah. And it was really easy to get home from as well for me. So that was a total bonus.
Yeah, that's a win. And I remember even just the weather, it was sunny all day. And then there was a light rain that fell when Daft Punk came out. It was just at the right time. We were all heating up. The whole thing, magic. I mean, to be honest with you, it was a big debate within our group whether we should go. So we had an A-level the next day. And I remember us weighing up to ourselves and thinking, okay, what do we think we'd regret more? Maybe doing a bit badly on this one A-level or not seeing Daft Punk. And definitely made the right choice.
You definitely did, yeah. Hello, loves. It's bloody hot, isn't it? I was going to do a whole thing, but it's hot, isn't it? Whose fault's that, eh? Well, all of ours. You're listening to Series 3, Episode 17, and to my guest, Mosa Mpehta. This is another Zoom interview recorded on the 10th of June 2022. So I was going to do a whole bit about Louis Le Prince and about the first images at Roundy Park and Roundy Park's 150th anniversary, and then Hyde Park opening up just 26 years after the first moving images were made in Leeds. But it's too hot. So who do we have this week then? Mosa Mpehta works for Hyde Park Picture House and is on the Scalarama Leeds team. She runs pop-up DIY screenings as Iconic Presents.
She does freelance film programming under her own name, or sometimes as Black Cinema Project, an initiative that she set up last year during the lockdown. Within her role at Hyde Park Picture House, she works with people, organisations, charities and so on outside of the cinema to curate interesting film events that are mutually beneficial. Mosa is passionate about film and using film as a tool to discuss, learn and make change. One example of this sort of activity is the collaboration with Leeds African Communities Trust, where she's developing a new permanent African film strand for Hyde Park Picture House called Cinema Africa. I say if you have never seen an African film, then you should. And what's more, now you easily can. All the usual, like, share, support, help out, listen, review, rate, do all of that, please. And yeah. Enjoy this episode.
So what is it that you are doing now?
So I kind of have my feet in two different sectors at the moment. I've been working for the last 7-8 years in children's theatre for a company called Tutti Frutti based in Hare Hills, which is fantastic. We make work to perform to children aged 3 to 7, and it's a glorious job. And then more recently, I've kind of got my other foot in another sector, which is in film. And this one's very much developing. I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time. You know, it feels like it's happening at once. It's all very exciting. But I do film programming. So that'll be kind of pop-up screenings that I'll do myself. I do some work in the Scalarama Leeds team, which is kind of a DIY pop-up screening festival. And I also work for Hyde Park Picture House in Leeds in the Hyde Park area as the creative engagement officer. And essentially in that role, it's really great. It's a bit of an amalgamation of all the kind of community-based screening stuff I was doing, but doing it as part of an organization. And I just work with anyone external to the cinema, and we work together to come up with interesting events. So it might be charities, it might be football clubs, it could be community groups. So it's kind of saying, hey, this is what I see what you're doing. Is there something we could do with you that's film related that might support your activity? So it's great. It's kind of film activity that's meaningful and helpful, and it's collaborative.
I'm well jealous.
It is a bit of a dreamy job.
So, I mean, what fills most of your time then out of that? Is it really kind of, do you get quite a balance with them, or is it one's kind of taking up more time? Or
I mean, because I was a freelancer for so many years doing events related stuff, I'm quite good at compartmentalizing. So that was a really big thing that I had to do, you know, marking out days or weeks, you know, that are carved out to different responsibilities. And you should see my diary. It's like a color-coded nightmare. And at the minute, I've got quite a sharp division between the week. So the first half of the week is the children's theatre work. And then the latter half of the week, and it bleeds into the weekend, is the cinema-related stuff, which lends itself quite well because cinema can be a night activity, you know, weekends, and the children's work is daytime, you know. So I've kind of got a quite good pattern at the moment. But I mean, as I said, things are going really well. So I'm doing quite a lot of extra activity, you know, of curated 5-film program for a film festival in Bristol called Cinema Rediscovered, which is great. It's kind of in my Hyde Park work, but it's also kind of my own stuff. So there's a lot of squeezing things in, you know, like trying to hold meetings immediately after work, a bit before work, lunchtimes. Life is busy at the minute, but you know, a good busy. Yeah, good.
Yeah, cool. I'm thinking of, like, shall we go down the how did you get into it route? But then you kind of alluded to some of it. So I'm thinking maybe it might be better to just kind of go straight into lockdown and sort of see where you were, and then, you know, sort of the before and after. So generally, the COVID question is kind of to take people back into that. And I want you to think of just before the lockdown, like where you were, what you were doing then. Then as the lockdown happened for you, and that initial sort of few days, few weeks, what was happening then, and sort of like, you know, coming out the other side, what has changed for you? You know, have there been permanent changes? Are they for the better or the worse, kind of thing? So yeah, take us through lockdown.
Yes. Okay. So I'd say I'm going to stick to film as the kind of the where I was, but my God, right before I was flying with regards to the amount of stuff that I was putting on, I kind of really got into the swing of putting on film events. I just that September to December period, 2019, I just put on a big film program called Fosse in Film, which was funded by Leeds Inspired and had several partners, and essentially just screened all of Bob Fosse's films, bar one, which is a bit of a dodgy film.
Was?
It's Star 80.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's very violent.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's kind of a little bit of a left turn from all the work that he did, but I can't watch it, so I wasn't going to screen it.
Yeah, fair enough.
But all his other stuff, the jazz hands, his music theatre, I'd screened all of those films. I was just so pleased with myself. You know, I'd got funding, I'd kind of promoted it. I was working with loads of different partners and venues. That was great. And I'd just done that. And I was just starting to do kind of some watch-along screenings with a friend of mine, Samra Mayanja, watching early African film. And so I was just in a point where I was kind of thinking, oh, what's my next project? You know, where am I going to go next with this? And then the start of 2020 happened. And I guess it put an immediate full stop onto the idea of thinking about projects. I guess actually I probably had some hope, and I probably thought I might do something again the next September in the Scalarama Festival. Because obviously we just didn't know, did we? We didn't know how long it was going to last. So I think I was maybe thinking ahead a little bit, but was mostly just kind of thinking, okay, events have stopped, so my activity has stopped.
Mm-hmm.
What did get born out of that moment was the African film watching I was doing with Samra. We kind of leaned into that more intensively, virtually with each other. So that had all kind of started where I was deep diving more into that kind of film, because I realized, oh my God, I didn't even realize that early African cinema existed. And because my interest is early cinema, so I was kind of relating to it, and I was feeling quite culturally stimulated. So I was trying to find these films. And as I was watching them, I realized they're so nuanced and complex and layered that I needed to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a talker, I find it hard to just process stuff in my head. I need somebody next to me to kind of go, oh, what do you think about this? Blah, blah, blah. To suss out how I'm feeling. So me and Samra started watching and talk about these films and thinking, oh, you know, maybe whilst we're in this period of not being able to be together physically, maybe we extend our watching together and kind of curate Black spaces to watch these films that are online. So that was the start of something that we did called Black Cinema Project, which was essentially bringing together exclusively Black people in an online space weekly on a Sunday to watch a film together and then just have a really deep conversation, which was more geared around being able to bring your lived experience, to be able to talk about how you really feel about a film. Because we recognize that the majority of film spaces that we were in were majority white. And when you watch a Black film in a white space amongst white people, it's really hard to kind of articulate your exact feelings about the film because you're worried about feeling representative. Everyone's looking to you like, what did you think? And I'm like, well,
I spoke to a Black person about this film and they said this, so I now know.
That's it. And it's like, you feel like you're kind of like, have to tap into the Black hive mind. Like, what is everybody thinking about this film? Like, I mean, we realized, okay, let's actually just make a space for us to talk about it really honestly. And it was just glorious. It birthed from one initial 3-week series we did. We kind of curated, which was focused on early African work, classics. And then we decided to do a second, I think it was a 6-week part season, which was more delving into from the outside looking in and more philosophical elements to philosophical is how you say that word. elements to film and the meaning behind it. So it was just glorious. There was it was a weekly space where we could just be together when we were all very isolated. And then on top of that, obviously, there was all of the trauma that was happening in 2020 with regards to the murder of George Floyd and then the repercussions following. So it also just became a really gorgeous, safe space.
To
be together in. It was a bit twofold, and that was quite accidental. So I think it felt like a really timely thing to be doing at that moment in time. And we pushed on with that for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years over that COVID period. Brilliantly, more film festivals started putting their stuff online. So we really maximized that. There's an amazing film festival called Africa in Motion based in Scotland, which started having all of its program online in October. So that was just fantastic. It meant that we spoke to the festival. They gave us some free tickets. So we took our Black Cinema Project group. We did virtual kind of school trips, to watch their films and then discuss them. So it just felt like the right thing to be doing at that moment. Yeah, the other thing, I guess, actually, that we were doing is the Scalarama Leeds team, which is a collection of people who will volunteer their time for free, who are passionate about film and community screenings. We kind of all really bonded together as a group and did weekly watch-alongs every Thursday, sometimes twice a week. And it was just a really gorgeous friendship group, essentially, and kind of checking in with each other and just watching really ridiculous threads of films. We were going, okay, let's start to look into Westerns. What Westerns are good? Let's go down this thread. So, all just thinking different themes. And so, yeah, it felt like film at that point remained pertinent into what I was doing, but just molded and changed and became a little bit of a support mechanism as well. And then I guess coming out of that, it was weird because I started to delve more and more into looking at film activism. Why was it hard to find certain early African films? Why do we not know they exist? What are the challenges to African filmmakers? We started to delve into more of those questions, and I started participating more with online film events, like conferences, the kind of things that just normally be happening in London or,
Q&As and talks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And getting to know the sector through their little photos on Zoom, having conversations and chats, and just kind of thinking, I'm really quite committed and into this. But now, as we were coming out of it, it's kind of thinking, oh gosh, what does it look like? What does the other side of this look like? This kind of branching into the wider film sector when I've never actually met anyone properly. So every event I've been to since has just been amazing. You finally get to meet people that you've been talking to for so long. And I feel like that's why things at the minute feels like are happening pretty quickly, because groundwork's been laid and conversations have been had. And then a minute I get to meet someone offhand in an event, it feels like, okay, great, well, let's do this thing together. There's a lot of energy, it feels like, at the moment. Yeah. And it is just weird in general for cinemas coming out of the COVID periods. I mean, when I first got the job at Hyde Park Picture House, it was last July. So we were, I don't know what even was happening at that point, what we were kind of coming out of it. We weren't, back and forth.
I would say open, because all the refurbs going on. So did it open all through lockdown? Or?
No. So weird, fortuitously and not, the cinema was due to close around about spring 2020 anyway for the refurb. So in a way, it was kind of set up and ready to not be functioning, in the same way, but there was supposed to be off-site activity going on.
Yeah.
So it put an extra year onto the timeline of the redevelopment. So the cinema itself has been received funding from National Heritage Lottery Fund to redevelop the building. It's basically not accessible. It was built in 1914. It's not really, it wasn't fit for purpose in today's day and age, especially with the kind of inclusive activity that the cinema wants to be doing. So it's brilliant that we've got an extension being put on, and there'll be lifts throughout, stairs, and a second screen in the basement. So an intimate 50-seater, which just means that the program can be expanded. There's less pressure on the bigger screen. And I think it's not going to be massive. It's still a confined space. Yeah. It's still kind
it's of still Hyde Park.
Yeah, it's still Hyde Park. It's still in an incredibly residential area in the corner of, it's still next door to a house. So there's only so much it'll expand, but it just means there's more flexibility with regards to the kind of activity that can happen. So no, when I started in the job, there still wasn't a cinema. Still never worked in the building.
You haven't been in the building?
No.
Oh my God. Because it's such a, that cinema is so important to Leeds and so important to me as well. Sort of when I was about 17, 18, and Reservoir Dogs was failing to come out onto video. Yeah, they were running it every Friday night, and so many nights we went in there, just watching it. And it was great when you'd be sitting near someone who, it was the first time they'd seen it and they didn't know anything about it. And they're like, oh my God, oh, what's happening? And you're just how did you not know about any of this?
Yeah.
And I've just watched so many films there. I remember because the film festival's based out of there, isn't it? Normally.
Well, yeah, one of the venues, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I saw Ingrid Pitt there after a screening of, I'm going to get the name wrong. It wasn't the Twins of Evil one. It was the other one. Oh my God, my brain's gone blank. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, before we move on, I'm going to ask you, we've been talking around films and African cinema and so on.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to go, so how far back are we talking in terms of early African cinema?
Yeah.
And second question in that is, drop some names. So what films have you watched within either the groups or whatever? What are kind of standouts or things that are noteworthy that just the top ones?
Yeah, no. Just for a second, I just want to clarify. I have watched films in Hyde Park Picture House. I just haven't worked.
Yeah.
I realize that might sound really weird. Never been. But yeah, so, okay. When I'm talking about African cinema, the first film that I saw, which kind of made me realize that there is early work, it was a film from 72, I think it was, 1972, called Wend Cooney. Is it 72? 74. It's early 70s, I believe, and set in Burkina Faso. And it's just a beautiful film, which was set in rural village life. So it's a family drama, essentially. And the thing that really impacted me about it wasn't about starvation. It wasn't about war. It wasn't about colonization. It wasn't about AIDS. It was kind of just family drama in a really rural village setting. So I think that was the thing that struck me, is all the images that I'd seen of African film experience on film was always very specifically about trauma and struggle, and from a white perspective. So when I'm talking about early cinema, there is film activity that's been happening on the continent for a really, really, really long time. But obviously, due to colonization and barriers in that way, it meant that there was less access to filmmaking. So there is some activity that happened pre-liberation in different countries, depending on what their situations were. And that's really exciting. And you kind of can find that kind of work. But the bulk of the work that I see is post-liberation, and especially in the transitional period. So what makes African cinema interesting to me and what makes it nuanced in layers is quite often film was being made as activism. So it's kind of saying, imagine it's in the 60s, there's lots of kind of guerrilla warfare going on. There's a lot of resistance activity, getting ready to overthrow the colonizers. film is then being used as a tool to promote these messages, but also has to be hidden under a story. So it means when you're watching a film that is about the family dynamic and maybe the head of the family is problematic, maybe it's reflecting on the leadership of the time being problematic. So that's why it was really important to me to kind of dissect these films and really treat them with care. And it's not sat in the cinema shoving popcorn in your mouth, kind of, wow, car crash, blah. It's kind of, oh, what is this saying? What is this film telling me? Because it is telling me something. So that's what I find particularly interesting about African cinema is it's meaty. It's the stuff going on. And I know we can say that about other films. I'm not saying that's exclusively an African thing. South America as well is really big on that kind of, they call it third cinema, some people. And it's essentially that kind of film that's geared around activism and resistance. So examples, that first season that Samara and I did for Black Cinema Project when we did African kind of classics, the first film we did was a film called Yilin by Suleiman Cisse, which is a Malian film, which is set in I think it's the 13th century that it's set in, made in oh God, I can never remember the actual years. Again, I think it's early 70s, late 60s. Is it? Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to get distracted with that. And it's beautiful because it's really digging into history. It's essentially kind of based around a fable or a story. It's storytelling. So, and it's a really beautifully stunning. The imagery on it is stunning, and it's kind of really nourishing because it's looking at African history and legend and tale. And it's also got mythicism in it. And it's quite surreal, beautiful, masterpiece, amazing. It is being restored again and will be kind of relaunched, I guess, into the international circuit because of this new restoration. The second film we showed in that season was a film called Sambizanga, which was made in 1972. I do know that. And that's an Angolan film, all about the Angolan revolution. And it's made by filmmaker Sarah Moldorora, who sadly passed away due to COVID a couple of years ago. And her story is kind of what's really got me really interested in the neo-colonialism behind film rights. So kind of who owns the films, who takes away the ownership from the filmmakers, where do they keep it? Why can't we get it? So her story is she made this film, Sambizanga, absolute classic of African cinema, about a woman trying to go locate her husband after he was stolen by the authorities because he was doing revolutionary activity. It's all about her trying to find him. It's all from the perspective of the underground nature of revolutionary activity. So from the woman's perspective, the elderly, the children, the wider network of people who are involved. Really radical. It's brilliant. And this film was lost. Sarah and her daughters were trying to get the film back so they could get it restored. And it turns out this old French guy has it in his basement and he's just like, no, I'm just not going to give it to you. And you're like, why?
Because I can.
Yes, I just don't want it. And I think they say, it's too expensive for me to kind of go get or restore. And they're like, no, we're gonna do that.
We'll do everything.
But there's just these weird barriers that are in place. So eventually they were working with the Cineteca in Bologna, which is a restoration center, to try and fight for this. And then eventually they had to call Martin Scorsese, who has something called the Film Foundation, which is committed to finding world cinema and restoring it and bringing it back into the public eye. And got Scorsese, get on the phone with this French dude,
Yeah. He's not going to mess about with that, is he?
Do you know what I mean?
Telling him straight away.
Exactly. So then they got the film back, they've restored it. And now Anushka, the daughter, is like taking it around the world to different places. And again, it's got a redistribution. So it's films. I just find it so exciting when films get the opportunity to be restored, brought back to life and then talked about in a new way. And that's what the Cineteca does in Bologna, is they were restoring these films, and they particularly try and focus on films where the filmmaker's still alive. So then they get to be invited to the festival. And these filmmakers going, oh my God, you know, I didn't realize there's still an audience for the film that I've made, you know, kind of 50 years ago. And yeah, something really magic about that. That's the kind of films that I've been looking at. And I don't know, I think there's something African film. I mean, for me, I'm just kind of trying to see the things that I recognize. I'm trying to make sense of my sense of place within all of this. And yeah, I'm pretty passionate about getting more people seeing African work. Because again, I just think not just for African communities in Leeds, for example, because I am starting to screen African work in Hyde Park Picture House, but just for wider communities, just people to kind of go, oh, right, Africa's really developed. Or do you know what I mean? There's a range of experiences and things going on.
Have you divided it into sort of like, have you done any kind of national cinemas? Like, have you done Burkina Faso and Uganda and Nigeria? And like, have you managed to, like, I suppose a lot of that from a curatorial sense is kind of like, do I know enough titles? Can I find enough titles to do this? And can I get the films is the next question. Because it's easy enough to, like, you're going through the research and someone's like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And then it's like, nowhere.
Yeah,
Can I find this?
Yeah. The amount of reading, I've got so many books, and I'm just to my right, got so many books on African cinema, and I read them all and go, cool, I want to see this. And then I'm like, right, where are they? You know what I mean? And then you start to realize, okay, so we know they exist because like academics have done the digging. They might have seen little clips, or they've spoken to the filmmaker, and the filmmaker said, yeah, I did this film. Who knows where that is? You know?
Yeah.
But there's more films that are unearthed than we know of. You know, just in general in film, like archive film is fascinating because there was such a boom in that industry, you know, 1900s onwards. So a lot of film exists, but it's just about finding it. It's kind of like I don't know, it's just a really exciting field to be in. But with regards to country by country, I find it, it's interesting when I'm looking at the films that I'm screening in Hyde Park Picture House. So we started something called Cinema Africa, which is a new permanent film strand that will be kind of bigger once we reopen. But I've been doing some test screenings, and I'm really trying to make sure that I'm showing a variety of countries and genres and experiences. Because when I was doing a survey of the Leeds African community through our partner, Leeds African Communities Trust, I was asking people about what kind of films they watched, what they know of. And everyone either knows, it seemed like people knew a classic from their country, like maybe one classic or two, and then mostly it's Nigerian films. Because, I mean, their sector is booming. They're extremely successful and the most visible country with regards to their work. So I'm very aware that I can't divert too much into just showing Nigerian, but you know, there's a plethora of stuff to show.
But then at the same time, you kind of could, because, like, you know, as far as I know, the only way to access sort of Nollywood films is like VHS and DVDs, and you have to go to a shop to get it. You know, it's not sort of in HMV or. Like, well, I don't even know how much it'd be on Amazon. Obviously, I've not looked. But
well, loads is the
really?
the short answer. Basically,
so it's a matter of knowing where to start.
Well, Netflix is really blooming smart, and they've recognised that there's a huge market of people who want to watch these films. Because, like you said, we've been watching them on VHS, on TV channels, on YouTube. You know, they're being watched. So Netflix has now been commissioning work. Nigeria and South Africa and other places, but they're also starting to purchase past big commercial successes of Nollywood and Nigerian cinema and pop them on Netflix. So if you type in African or Nigerian now into Netflix, there's loads, loads and loads. And I mean, your algorithm will change gradually. I mean, mine's totally changed. I'm very aware of this range of films. Amazon, likewise, just more and more. So, but it's when I'm digging through all of that, I'm kind of aware of all the Nigerian stuff. And then I'm trying to look, okay, what else is that? You know, what other countries have managed to slip in with this pile of films that have been put on. There's a film that I'd screened, a Zimbabwean film called Cook Off, which I screened earlier this year. And it was interesting because it was on Netflix as well. And I kind of wanted to get an impression of, would people still come to a screening, even though it's on Netflix? But basically the result is yes, they will, because it is a different experience.
Yeah.
But that film is now the biggest Zimbabwean film because of the reach that it's had.
Yeah.
Netflix, you know, and it's happening gradually. Netflix is buying up more of these films. So it's, you know, it feels like it's part of a wider energy. People are more curious, and I think people are more willing to try out different stuff. And also just African audiences are being more recognized as audiences, and that they're willing to buy, basically.
Yeah. Before we move on and get back to specifically work-related stuff, like, do you think it's worth sort of spending a couple of minutes on kind of distinctions between sort of, you know, why African cinema over Black cinema? And then again, like, I mean, is that something that you can do separately? Like, you know, you could do Jamaican cinema or, you know, so I'll let you answer.
Yeah, I mean, Black Cinema Project wasn't just African work, but that was, we did an initial strand which was specifically focused on African. No, I'm interested in all international work, really. And when I say international, I mean the South, the East. I think I have a weird thing with American films where I feel a little bit like I've got the limited time in the day and I'm not going to use it watching something American. Do you know what I mean? Or something different.
Something made for 15-year-olds in America.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? But I mean, you know, I do watch new films. Like, I'm excited about stuff that's coming out. I've just seen everything, everywhere, all at once.
Oh my God, it's amazing, isn't it?
My mind was... I could talk the rest of this podcast just about that film.
I know. I know, yeah, we're using up time as well.
Yeah, sorry.
It doesn't matter. No, it's fine. But it is amazing.
It's amazing. Oh my God, everyone watch that film. It's incredible. One of the best cinema experiences I've ever had. I was weeping the whole way through. And there was
laughing hysterically.
I'm laughing. There was this old guy sat next to me who was equally just crying his eyes out the whole way through. And my God.
Yeah.
Anyway, I watch all film. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think the reason I specify African in this sense is because I think if you can specify, you should. So I think when we say Black things, you know, I think it's worthwhile saying, what do we mean by that? You know, and there is a space for all different types, you know, of film and Black film. But if when I'm doing this work with Leeds African Communities Trust, I'm looking at African cinema specifically. Do you know what I mean? However, within that, there is also space to look at diaspora cinema.
Yeah.
So because obviously there are Africans everywhere, you know, I'm in Leeds. So it is all, I just want to get to a point first, I think, with the program. Again, the cinema's not open yet. So I'm still very much just establishing all of those bits. And then we'll start to look at diaspora more as well and expand it in that way with regards to, like films in the Caribbean. I mean, I'm really into Cuban cinema. So
yeah, there's some good stuff there.
Absolutely. And there's an amazing festival in Scotland again called Havana Glasgow Film Festival, and they are superb. So yeah, I don't know. I guess within my personal programming, I feel like I'll be taking different waves of where my focus is, you know, at a moment in time. So for example, right now, because of the work I'm doing with Bristol's Film Festival, I'm quite focused on that strand. And that strand is global South films centered around women. So there's 5 films and they're all kind of films from the global South. It's not just African films, it's like a Cuban film, Venezuelan film, and looking at why the barriers of ownership. So the ownership of the film being taken away and returned back to them. All of the films I'm showing have that thread. So that's kind of my focus at the moment. And that centers around African work, but wider than that, So it feels like that's what my brain's full of, is looking at the stories behind the films and what's the kind of journey that they've taken. Whereas, then I can go and do some work with my pal Ezra, who we do Iconic Presents together, and we screen queer classics, essentially, or kind of queer culture films that people might have heard of but maybe not seen. Things that are heavily referenced in, say, RuPaul, for example, and people go, "Oh, I keep hearing people talk about it, but I haven't seen it," So, and then that'll be a kind of particular focus, and we'll go down that wave. I think what's really gorgeous about film and film curation is I just feel completely led by, what am I interested in right now? What's stimulating me? What do I want to know more about? Because it's not a bad habit, it's a good habit, I guess. I can't just screen a film. I'm like, I need to read everything around it. When I did my Bob Fosse season, I've got five biographies by Bob Fosse that I was like steaming through, because I just think there's something, a film feels like it's just an hour and a half long and that's it and it's done. Whereas actually that film,
so much work's gone into it.
So
You're like, I want to know everything.
Exactly. And it just feels good to treat each film as a gift. There's a lot of conversation around it. There's so many different elements to it. A lot of work was put into it. Well, how does this film sit in the context of the wider, situation at the time? I just think it's really nice to kind of deep dive into the films in a very intensive way, and just also have just loads of conversations about it with people. Okay, what's this mean to you? What about this element? Oh, this is a bit contradictory. What do we think about this? I just think I'm just particularly excited by it.
I completely understand. I'm completely sympathetic. So, I mean, as well, just finding new forms of cinema, like you said, like sort of discovering Cuban cinema, and you kind of like, because you hear about, if you sort of, as a film person, I suppose there's like levels of deepness that you go down. So, like if you like world cinema, then you'll hear about you'll be like, oh, well, I should watch some Iranian cinema. Like, when you get beyond France and Germany. So it's like, yeah. So, and it's just a discovery. Every new one's like, oh my God, that was really good. What else have they done? And then they're like, they've copied off someone else. So you're like, well, what did they do? And you just could go on forever.
It is literally never ending.
Yeah.
And I find that, I think that's partially why I focus in as well, because I do find it really overwhelming, the idea that, there are so many films being released every year from all the countries in the world. And you just think, I find new release exciting, but entirely overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I feel also in the film world, there's a lot of film bros, and there's a lot of people who have kind of encyclopedic knowledge that I just feel like I could never compete with, because I don't know all the American films. I've got huge gaps in my knowledge about quite standard like American cinema that I feel like I should have seen, but it just didn't appeal. So I just didn't really watch it. And I feel really, sometimes I have to really kind of tell myself, most of it's okay that you don't know quite basic things sometimes, but we consider is what we consider is, the classics, because actually there are other classics, but we've just not really looked at them as much. So I think that's why I find comfort in specializing and deep diving, and even looking back, I find more comfortable than looking forward, because I think at least there's a finite number. I know it is, a huge number, but if I kind of go, all right, I'm going to look at archive African film from 1950 to 1970. It just makes me feel comforted, because I'm like, oh, there's walls.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And then at least, I can feel quite knowledgeable in it. But I have found coming into the sector quite intimidating, just because one, it's everybody's sector. It's an art form that most people relate to. And then two, there are just people who I don't really understand how they manage to hold so much the encyclopedic type knowledge about film in their heads. I don't have that in my head. I have it on my letterboxed app. I feel, do you know, I have it in my notes. Like, I know what I feel about stuff, but the facts around it, you know, kind of who directed what. Oh, and then that director did all of these things, and then you know, she went on to do this. I find that really hard to hold on to.
But you remember, you know, you hold the information that's important to you. Like, this is important to me. You know, like if you're an obsessive Star Wars fan, you're kind of like, well, I need to know what all of these animals are called, because if someone else questions my knowledge, then I'm weak. So it's like, but if that's not important to you, like, you're not going to hold on to it. But if you see a film that you're like, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And you're like, you remember that director's name because you're like, what else have they done?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then if the rest of it's great, then that name sticks because you're going to seek out anything that kind of comes across your table.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. And I do find that's the other thing that's great about going in quite deep about a film at a time is then the knowledge is embedded. Do you know what I mean? Because I've been doing so much reading around one particular film and then I'll get very intense about it. So it might be, no, I don't know all of Scorsese's films, but I am getting very focused on, say, I don't know, Burkina Faso, you know, so it feels, I think I find comfort in specializing. I find comfort in digging and kind of carving out a space for myself, I guess, in this massive sector.
Yeah. I mean, it makes total sense to me. So last question on this kind of area. In terms of your reading and kind of, you know, finding everything out about the film, do you wait till after you've seen it, or can you not wait? And like, how badly does that, or how well does that color the experience of, like, have you got into a method now where you're like, I can't read everything about it because my interest is piqued. Now I have to see it and then I'll check out it.
I think it depends, because when I'm doing the digging, when I'm trying to find, I don't know, an African film that's rare or whatever, chances are I will have read about it and around it because I kind of know it exists. And then eventually if I find it, it doesn't feel like it mars the experience because it's more about trying to access it. So I do a lot of, you know, because I'm reading these books that list all these films and I'll kind of get a sense of, you know, what they're about through that. And then when I finally watch them, it doesn't mar it for me. But then equally, I'll just find something, I'll watch it. And then if it really piques my interest, oh my God, now I need to know more and more and more. So, but there's certain films I deliberately try and not watch, but that's more than new stuff. So going back to Everything Everywhere All at Once, I knew that it was being talked about in a big way. And I kind of thought, that's enough. I don't need to look into anything about this. I'm just going to go watch it. You know, I didn't know what the genre was. I got very confused when it did the kind of shift from drama to action. And I was like, what am I watching? And it just, But I think immediately after the film then, after going to sit in the loos and have a big old weep to myself and just decompress, I was then intensively need to read everything. You know, need to read every review. I need to read reviews, specifically Asian American film reviewers. I need to understand this. I need to listen to this podcast. You know, I feel like if something takes me, you know, I want to go in. I want to really understand about it. So, but and there are film podcasts that I do listen to, but I do tend to only listen to episodes about films that I've seen. In film podcasts. Because I want to, you know, be able to kind of relate the things that people are saying about it.
So I'm not going to, you know, continue on that. So I could equally come back with, we would carry on in this kind of vein. So I'm going to move on with questions. Right. So I think what I want to go straight from there to is social media. My question is around, or what I want you to be thinking about with this question is, so social media, it's more and more work media. It is part of more and more people's working life. Takes up a good amount of time. How much time does that take up for you? And is the return on investment that you get from that time worth it for you?
God, it's such a double-edged sword, isn't it? Social media. I feel like social media for me is work now, basically, as in my Twitter. I don't do Instagram. because we're intimidated by just seeing images and feeling like I didn't want to get caught into that feeling of my life's not enough. I don't really want to see other people's fantastic lives. So I'm happy. So I just kind of try to avoid Instagram really, but Twitter's the one that I use and it is basically work. I constantly battle with feeling the need to put out there the things that I'm doing and trying to articulate, find a way to involve people into the processes that I'm going through. And also feeling a huge resistance to speak out into the ether. And just, it feels to me self-indulgent and embarrassing. So I'm always battling, mostly if you don't talk about it, people won't know, you know? Yeah. So I'm trying to find a comfortable voice with it still. When I'm putting on a screening in Leeds, you know, the hardest thing about it, when it's a DIY screening, so it's not kind of through Hyde Park Picture House, maybe it's something that Ezra and I'll do. And, you know, the hardest bit is just the marketing, it's just the socials. That's the bit I want to hand over to someone else and go, please I'll run everything else. You just make people come. Like,
have you got an emailing list?
Yeah, we have I have a mailing list and we collect new ones every screening and we contact people through that. It feels a little bit like it's about your personal kind of profile. It's almost, for me, it's beyond each individual screening. It's kind of, because like I was saying, I feel a pressure to now be present in the sector. You know, I want to be visible. I'm proud of the things that I'm doing and I want to kind of be recognized, but then just putting that energy into how I do that without cringing at myself constantly.
Yeah, and you don't want to be visible to the wrong people either. It's because it is like it's terrifying on a lot of levels.
Yeah, that's it. And I really admire. There's a lot of like people on Twitter that I follow that just have such gorgeously authentic and quite funny and light voices, you know, which kind of feeds what they're doing, but they're just kind of spieling out a narrative. But I think I'm just so scared of feeling like looking for the likes or, you know, I don't mind just putting out what I'm just thinking because I'm scared that what if nobody likes it and then I feel bad about it. I'm still trying to find a way. I keep coming back to the idea of maybe I'll do a podcast. So just again, to be talking about my passions about film in a way that's kind of controlled. But I don't know. I'm still battling with it. I still find it really complicated but you know, there's so many pros, you know, I feel like I've connected with so many people through socials, you know, getting a message in your DMs from someone. I had a really beautiful exchange with Tape Collective, who did a season all about mixed heritage experience, and that was screening in London. And then they did some of the screenings online. And I watched it and I was so touched by what they'd done. I was so invested in the messaging and what they were saying. And I kind of was responding on Twitter. You know, I just wanted to I felt an urge, you know, it was like wanting to write a letter. And then as a result, they were just so pleased that I was having this impact on me. And then we got in touch and then now we did screenings together in Leeds, you know, so it is that gorgeous that you've got that access point. So you can just directly say to people, you know, this is what I'm thinking and feeling, etc. So it is great. But, you know, I mean, then you just, sometimes I'll be scrolling and I'm just infinitely jealous and annoyed that I'm not doing as much as everybody else. So I don't know. I feel very, very conflicted about it. I'm going to keep going with Twitter and I'm going to stick to one. And I'm trying to get better at saying what I'm doing, but I don't have a love for it, basically. Yeah. No, it doesn't come easy for me.
Yeah. You need a person for it, don't you?
Oh my God. Social media people are the best people in the world. They're just people who love it and can think of fun, quirky things. And, you know, there was that great social media account. What was it? The Merle, the Museum of English Rural Life.
All right.
It's just a little museum in England, about countryside and rural stuff. This guy who had run the social accounts was so funny,
Mm.
and he just did such a good job of being the voice, a really kind of a slightly sarcastic and funny voice of this museum. Obviously, they just let him run with it, and then it exploded. And now it's a really popular museum. And, I think it was all based around this one tweet he did of a sheep. And he just said underneath like absolute unit or something like that. And it was just kind of just taking the mickey a little bit about the displays. And I think he now works for the Royal School of Art, maybe. I don't know. So when I've watched stuff like that happen, I think, oh my God, people who have got the knack for it, just the confidence and just the natural humor and can put that humor into a tweet. I admire it.
Yeah.
It's just not me.
Yeah. I want to stand at the back, nodding approvingly at the thing I've put together.
Yeah. I would honestly, I feel no sweat about putting on, even a complicated logistics operational event. None of that stresses me out, high risk stuff, fine. But getting people to come is all
putting yourself in front of the camera and going, hello, how are you today?
Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. It is a role. It's a thing, isn't it? It's just interesting that we're all expected, but it's funny in the arts you're expected to do everything. And I think that's the thing that's tricky really, is it is this very specific role.
Does it not intrigue you as a film enthusiast though, of like this opportunity to make films, even though they're short? I mean, is there not a part of you that's like, well, I could be a filmmaker? Because you are like, for social media, you have to be a filmmaker, like a broadcaster or a photographer, a graphic designer, voiceover artist, actor, performer, writer. Like,
no. I have no desire to become a film. Honestly, I feel like, for the first chunk of my life, I've been working very operationally. I've been extremely comfortable being the facilitator of other people's ideas. So that has been, for the first so many years of what I was doing, it was very much, here's me in the background. You tell me a dream. I'm going to make it happen. It's going to be great. That's been my job and I've loved it. Now my thinking is shifting and I've got ideas, but I want to, now it's about, I really want to delve into people's ideas. I really want to delve and have opinions about it and bring my own personal experience and emotional connection to people's ideas and kind of reflect on that. So that's kind of the shift that I've made. I still don't have a dream to make, to create. I think, I don't know, maybe that'll be me in another 10 years. I don't know, but I just don't feel it. I feel extremely curious. I think that's the thing that's burning me at the moment, is I just want to know. I want to understand. I want to relate to other people. I want to kind of have deep conversations. That's kind of, and that's definitely, that's come out of me delving into film, but also post 2020, it's kind of come from a place of me needing to connect and to kind of understand one another and feel part of something. I think, that's kind of my motivation at the moment. But as we know, things can change quite quickly. So I feel very aware that wherever my career goes, I can't see where it's going at the minute, but I'm comfortable and I'm excited.
So that drives me. So I'm going to go to the climate change question based on this. So I use climate change as a kind of to represent the whole of the various ecological disasters we are involved in currently, and that are accelerating. So in your work, what can you do? What are you doing? Or can you do anything at all? Or is it even a concern regarding climate change, adaptation, mitigation, impact reduction? Over to you.
Climate change. Yeah. It's one of those topics that I just find it can be so overwhelming if I don't think about it in small chunks. And I do go through existential kind of moments where, you just feel like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm not doing enough. I'm but a tiny little ant in the spectrum of the world and I can't do anything. However, what I do find interesting about climate change is kind of looking at the climate justice element of it and what climate change means in a variety of senses. I think in film related stuff, what's fascinating is the more that we watch African cinema and cinema that's centering about living practice, how people are kind of engaging with the environment, how people respect their environment. And there's a lot to be learned about kind of communities that are basically supporting the environment that they're in. And then obviously there's a wave of films now that's kind of looking at how it's disproportionately affecting different people in different places in the world. I am interested in screening it. I am interested in having conversations about it. I feel like sometimes all I get to do is like awareness spreading rather than direct action. Yeah, I don't know. It's
still
really
valuable though.
It is. It is. It is just that balance, isn't it, of trying to not feel so overwhelmingly guilty, really.
What you've made me think of something there. So, the quite often with this question, it's sort of we're kind of primed to think personal responsibility and kind of, what we should be doing, and we're not vegan enough, or we're flying too much, or we're not recycling enough, or we haven't got the bag for life or the lifelong bulb or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side, which is like, but we all know that it needs to change at the kind of systemic level.
Sure.
But it's also the peer pressure level.
Yeah.
It's like, peer pressure is immensely, immensely powerful. We know that. But then we don't think of like, well, everyone else is not doing it, like everybody else is driving or flying or, setting fire to a forest.
Yeah.
So, it's that sort of, look up and kind of push the system, but also, I mean, not like you don't want to be sort of negging all your neighbors and stuff, but there is that kind of, I think we're starting to see people creating places where people can go and think climate or talk climate.
Yeah.
That's more than that conversation of like, I should be doing more and I feel bad.
Sure. Yeah.
Government should change.
Yeah. I think I don't know. It feels to me, you're right. There's the very personal aspect and kind of you tie it into your head and thinking, oh, well, how much am I using my car, etc. But I think broader about it, I think it's attached to all activism that's about bettering human experience in its widest sense. So I do try and think to myself, as long as everything that I'm doing is coming from a place of wanting to better the environment that I'm in, and I don't just mean the physical environment, I mean raising it, like, for example, by committing my time to try and understand, being activist with regards to filmmakers owning their own films or awareness of films that exist and kind of uplifting the African film sector. There's obviously repercussions that come from that because it's about empowering people and people being able to kind of live the life they want to live and share the things they want to share. And so my approach with it tends to be, because I'm so guided by the things that I'm passionate about, is to ensure that where my passion is leading is benefiting an environment or somebody else. So, and I'm also really aware that it's so easy to batter yourself about kind of not doing enough. So I think, I don't know, in my brain, I try and rein it in, I guess, and try and think to myself, you are but one very small thing in my lifetime, to my wider lifetime, to the world's kind of lifetime. All I can do is try and ping pong around people and like have a positive impact. And that's all I can do. So I am very aware with regards to personal action and work related actions, and we're implementing them. But I think that's where I kind of almost have to unless I'm directly focusing on a type of film or program, etc., that's related to that. I kind of just leave it as part of wider activism of being a good person. Because no, I'm not going to protests. You know, I feel like I haven't thoroughly engaged in activism in that way. I am particularly curious about Black activism and climate change. And there was a beautiful play that I saw. Oh God, here we go. Names. There's a theatre company called Complicité, which I think is probably the greatest theatre company in the world. And they worked with Fenty Balogun, that came back, right? This guy, and he made a piece all about his experience as a Black climate activist and how the space wasn't for him, and him trying to convince his mom and his friends, and also being rejected from this community, or having extra fears, for example, not being able to go to a climate justice protest because you think, do you know what, if I'm arrested, this is going to go worse for me. So I'm particularly interested in looking at it through that lens. I like looking at it, again, using my passions and my interests to kind of come at it from that angle. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really big question. And I do find myself having to battle with trying not to kind of feel bad and just kind of remind myself, you can only do what you can do. And as long as we're talking about it, and in both my kind of workplaces, it is very visible, you know, it's very ingrained into all of our thinking. Hyde Park Picture House is becoming a new building, you know, that is in the process. We're very much thinking about when we're kitting out our new cafe type bar, you know, all of the elements that come through that, everyone's thinking about it with an environmental mindset. Now, because I think we work in a sector which is particularly alive to impact on other people, you know, in the arts and cultural sector, we're quite good for, you know, thinking ethically. So it is there, it's embedded, you know, that people are thinking about it. So I can kind of relax. It's not like I feel like I have to be complaining to my management because we're, you know, we have poor waste output or whatever. I feel like things are in hand. So it kind of alleviates that pressure to feel like you have to be an immediate activist in my surroundings, but it just then comes into my curational thinking, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. That's exactly what I was going to say as you were sort of talking then. I was like, well, it sounds like it's already embedded anyway. And then you just, you know, you said it, so I don't have to say it. So
Yeah. It's just keeping it, and it's just at the forefront, isn't it? I think it just, we can't help it.
But you have to do that by design, don't you? It's kind of like, if it's an afterthought, it's always going to be an afterthought because it's not, you know, it's like marketing. If any organization or any business, if marketing's an afterthought, then you're kind of losing, because you've got to be doing it all the time. It's got to be part of, you know, regular business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And always, like, for example, always thinking about the audience first, you know, it's that kind of just thinking about the process of everything. Yeah. I mean, it feels like we're in a good place in that. I mean, I know Leeds is particularly good. Do you know what I mean? With regards to its climate activism, we're really connected with SAIL as well, Sustainable Arts in Leeds, who've just been so brilliant and really good help. So it feels, I know it doesn't feel enough always, but it also does feel good. You know, people are doing what they can. You know, that's just a campaign against the rich, I guess.
Yeah.
Real problem.
Or perhaps do even more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where have we gone? All right, let's do Brexit. Sorry. I mean, it's through a work lens. It's yeah. So we've Brexited. Has it changed your work at all? Have you noticed any change?
I guess the main difference I've noticed is with regards to our international community, I guess, and being able to connect with people and how we work together. I feel like I'm going to feel it more and more as time goes on, to be honest with you. I think we're very much at the start of it because the world is just more opened up again more recently because of COVID. I do feel like there's worse to come with regards to Brexit that we just haven't quite seen. So yeah, I don't know. It's one of those ones where every time you learn something new or you see a new shortage or something, you kind of go, oh, right, here we go. This is where it is. But I do think at the moment, I haven't quite seen the worst of it. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those things that existentially I feel terrible about. I feel very embarrassed whenever I go to.
Has it affected anything for you? I mean, has it kind of like, has it made anything, I mean, has it made films even harder to get hold of? Has it?
Yeah, I think with regards to, in a really physical sense, postage, takes longer.
Yeah, I suppose because you're not going to have digital exhibition packages for like
Well, you do for some.
Yeah,
but
for
not
modern
all.
ones, but
Yeah.
like if you're tracking down like classic or early African cinema, it's like it's not going to be, unless it's a big name one that they've sort of worked.
I guess the main point about that is that because we're not in our cinema at the moment, we're doing screenings outside. It means that we're screening off DCP or doing digital screenings, and they can mostly be downloaded. Some are posted. When we reopen the cinema, we'll have our 35mm and 16mm projector, and then that's when the things will be sent more physically. So I guess at the minute, I haven't seen it as much. However, the other beauty of Hyde Park Picture House is that there's a team, and there is people. I'm not receiving the films directly. I mean, the luxury of my job is I get to go, oh, I've got an idea, I'm going to put it in place. And then we've got a team and we all work together to implement it. So I don't really see the process elements of the postage, etc. But I do know we aren't seeing the most of it at the moment. And when we get back to full cinema working and we're kind of working around this 35mm, I think that's when we'll see the main bulk of that. I'm trying to think of any other kind of direct examples really with regards to restrictions. I think I've seen some issues with regards to visas, and amongst my colleagues and friends that work in festivals. And
if you run events and stuff and you
it's hard to bring people over. There's a big loss of funding. I think not having access to Creative Europe has made a big difference. I know that's really impacted Leeds International Film Festival when I was working with them. Budgets have just changed. There's like holes in people's budgets. It feels like there are some really, it feels like the financial loss and the last loss of kind of movement is the thing that's difficult. Not impossible. I think, we will work around it. It's just frustrating, and I don't know. It's one of those things that I do feel like we're just starting to see it. You know what I mean? I think I'm ready to be told suddenly, my God, you can't do this thing. Why? Oh, because of this change. And then realize, what? And then there's a whole new thing to think about. But I don't know. I think I feel less panicked about it currently because so far I've kind of seen workarounds. It's more when I go to international film festivals or I'm speaking with people, it's just embarrassment really. It's always kind of people eventually always turn around to you and go, so Brexit, what's going on? And you're like, I'm sorry.
Well, we're going to have to get used to it because it's not going to get any better.
Exactly. So it is just that embarrassing thing really. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know, in the picture of world affairs at the moment, everything's bonkers. So it feels like it's not really been at the forefront of my mind because there are just so many crises that are kind of more in our faces. Impending war and current war and migration and
the next war.
And then, and that's it. And just all of the rising racism, homophobia, transphobia. There's just a lot of things.
The rise of the right.
Yeah, I feel like Brexit is definitely kind of filed down on my list just because I can't see it. It doesn't feel as scary as some of the other things that's going on at the moment.
Yeah, the shortening of life expectancy.
Yeah, rise in living costs.
Yeah, rise in mortality rate. Falling standards of living, increasing inequality. Yeah, we could go on.
Yeah, burnout.
So, I mean, this is each of these subjects. It's like COVID as well. It's like it's still going to be around at the end of this decade. We will be talking about all of these things, all of this decade.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know that from the way that the media presents anything.
Yeah. It's here. It's amongst us. This is where we're at. I think we just have to be really kind to each other. We have to allow space. I think in a work context, I think one of my biggest concerns is a lack of recognition that we're all hanging on by a thread,
Mm.
you know, and it feels
People that aren't really aware, like there's no proper awareness of just how bad things really are. Everyone's kind of got like, oh, I can see the edge of the curtain and it doesn't look good round there. They've had really bad experiences and they are having bad experiences, but it's kind of like, no, it's worse. Worse.
Yeah. And I just think that, I don't know, what scares me, I guess, is that we're not slowing down enough to kind of just make a better bit of care, I think. It scares me that because we've been preoccupied by lack of activity due to COVID and the sense that we need to catch up, get back in shape, back in order, makes me nervous that we're not really recognizing how hard the transition has been and how hard, you know, it is to get back to where you are. When we're all different people, we've been through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some really brilliant kind of examples of companies kind of saying, like, we're just going to close for August, for example. Do you know what I mean? We're just going to have like an extended summer, like not taking up people's holidays, just really allow the space. I don't know many people really, the people that I speak to, my friends, and we're all tired, very, very tired. And that doesn't mean you're not high functioning and productive, but it just, the sense of kind of, are we okay? It just feels like consistently, no, we're not, but we're still doing what we're doing.
Yeah, well, it's like that sort of, you know, to call it, you know, to use shit terms, like that sort of check-in culture or check-in mentality. It's kind of, it's really good. Yeah, you definitely need to check in on people and stuff, but it's also like, you know, you don't stand in the middle of the motorway and you know, where you're doing a crossing or whatever and say to your mate, are you all right? You know, it's like, it's like, you need to make sure people are all right. But then the best people aren't going to be all right if you don't take care of the huge looming threat or start working on it so that people are busy and they feel that they're doing something. So it's that, you know, it's kind of like, oh, well, you know, is everybody okay? So you could kind of, oh, well, you know, we all had a big break with COVID and stuff. And it was like, well, yeah and no. It's also like massively traumatic and everybody was affected. And it was a really weird event.
Yeah.
And it's still having massive repercussions. And you know, again, I'd witter on phrases. So
No, I think, and also on top of that, like, let's just not forget how intense 2020 was and like the repercussions amongst the Black community of like the intense trauma, the heightened awareness of organizations to then respond, and then the onus on Black people to have to talk about what they're thinking and feeling or give advice and just bring their lived experience to work in a really visible way. That is, I mean, I know that I hadn't done that before. You know, I'd never really brought race into work in that way. I felt like it was a blooming big learning curve for me and I wasn't prepared for it. And it felt like I've been strapped into a roller coaster that I just didn't want to be on.
Yeah.
And you just think, okay, we're still dealing with the repercussions of that. Well, there just feels like there's very little space to breathe. And I'm scared that we're going to become accustomed to these burnout kind of stress related feelings, and they're going to be perpetuated into new mental health conditions. So, you know, when you know, work related stress just becomes stress, you know, and I don't know. I just have a fear that we're all pretty overwhelmed. And I am speaking very personally, but I am also speaking off the basis of the people around me.
Yeah.
But it's just a lot, lot.
And there's no respite because it's not going to get any better. It's kind of like, so where do we go? I mean, this was something that I wanted to kind of touch upon when we were doing the kind of film chatting. Like in terms of, you know, it's good to, and you mentioned some of that, you know, sort of seeing things within their own environment and different types of environment in some of the African cinema that you mentioned earlier. But I feel like there's, and like you said, there's some stuff starting to come through, but there's no like visions, not only of a positive future, but just of the reality of now. Of, like, so the only thing that I can really kind of think of comes immediately to mind is like, you know, within Parasite at the end with the flooding and stuff. And it's like, that that struck me, because it was like, look, now I'm actually starting to see it in film, in cinema. So, it's like some Waterworld thing or some other thing where, or even AI, the end of AI, where you sort of New York's underwater. And it's like, and that's all going to happen. Like, we know London and New York are going to be underwater. And nobody's acting like this. Like, this is pretty much going to be an inevitability at this point, sort of thing. And it's like, millions of people in these places, and nobody's thinking about that. It's like, what are you going to do with them when they move? Not just like, never mind everything else everywhere else.
Yeah.
It's like, you have to start dealing with it now, because it's just going to be overwhelming.
But I think that's the, yes to that. But I think there's almost like two opposing forces, isn't there, in your brain, of kind of, why aren't we panicking? And also, what can I do? And I do think that my comfort place is truly just to, it's like have you ever seen those kind of websites where you can like zoom in and out and out and out and out, where it's kind of, you look at, an ant in space and that. My comfort place is to think about me and my life and my existence as a speck, on this spectrum. And I can feel bad about the things that are going to happen in the future. Whereas just humans' existence is so small in the planet's existence. What annoys me about climate change is we talk about protecting the environment. The environment will live on. It's about people. Do you know what I mean? I think we need to recenter the conversation. So we're looking at, how do we protect our society? How do we protect our people? Because the environment, the world, will evolve and it will change and it will exist but will exist without us. So I think it's more about, how do we protect our survival and our neighbours' survival and survival of the people on the other side of the planet, I think that is more, that for me feels more sensible, because then we're bringing it in to kind of focus on what we can do. But I think protecting I don't know, there's something about that kind of narrative that I find quite troubling, because of the fact that I think of me and the speck and our humanity as a tiny period of time, and all we can do is try and maintain our period of time and the kind of the span of life. And so, but I that's where I kind of go back to, when instead of worrying too much about far in the future, just try and think, I can be a good person. I can try and have positive impact and make change. And then if I don't, I don't. Because going back again for the third time to everything, everywhere, all at once, the philosophy of that nothing really matters. And you kind of, all you can do is deal with what you've got. And we're in an extremely privileged position in being where we are, and the fact that we have the ability to make change, and we're one of the least effective places about climate change and the environment, and we can have an impact. So I think, okay, well then let's use what power that we have and do what we can, but also know that we're limited. Do you know what I mean? But we do have people power, and I do believe in all of that. But yeah, I don't know. I just always have to bring it back to me and my little speck, and kind of knock-on effects and being a good person, because it's just too existential. My brain can't cope. It's too delicate right now.
I'm going to do UBI first, I think. So if there was a universal basic income, would you still work? If you were still working, would you still do the same job? And how do you think it would change your attitude to work and working if it was around?
I guess firstly, I'm lucky that I enjoy all the things that I do. But if there was a universal basic income, it would change what I did. I love supporting other people in putting on their film screenings and building the community, the DIY film sector. So I would allocate more time to be able to support other people in their endeavors, for sure. But I'd still be engaged in the same topics that I'm in. I'd just probably do it a bit less, I think, or just I'd feel maybe I'd had more space to do it.
Even if there was more to do because there was more filmmaking going on, because there was more of these frustrated filmmakers who could be like, right, I can do it now. And then you're like, oh, I can help you.
Yeah.
You might have more work to do, but.
Yeah. And that's it. I guess you need to see what the true repercussions of that would be. I think it's fair. I think it's fair and it feels like a logical thing to do. I do believe in it. I'm just so lucky that I'm just guided by the things that I love and my passions. So it just would be the same thing, but it would just be done differently.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have more time to watch and to read.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like at the minute it's definitely crammed into the in-between spaces. I'd love more time to just be able to reflect. So I think for me, it's just about, it would be creating more space around the things that I'm doing, because right now I'm very go. I'm delivering, and it's fine because I'm quite a high functioning person, but I can feel that it's a strain. So I think basically the same stuff, but just less of it or more contained.
More of the same, but less and better.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than more of the same, but worse.
Done. Do you know what I mean? I think when we think that we're doing a lot because we're working a lot, but we're not, because you're not, I remember when I first went into the arts, and because came from a very operational mindset, I like procedure, I like fine tuning things, I like to make things slicker. The first time going into the arts, I was thinking, why are we all doing things this way? Why am I doing the same tasks every year? It takes me this long to do. Whereas actually I could just spend that time to fix the problem and we don't have to do it again.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I like fine tuning. I like process. So, and I think there is a bit of an absence of that sometimes in the creative industries or places where people are passionate about things, because there's quite a lot of creative folk who are delivering, but we need people who have that kind of mindset to go, great, the thing that you're doing, that's fab. How about if we did it in this way? And then you've got more time to think about it. And then the admin behind it is slicker. Because the private sector and the corporate sector, they're really good at, efficiency and trying to make things, because they're motivated by capitalism, right? They're motivated by the rewards of that. Whereas we're our rewards is the creative output, which we try not to be, have a capitalist focused, although it does. So sometimes I think that efficiency gets left behind, and efficiency is a good thing because it allows space to be able to do the creative stuff. So I don't even remember how I got onto that.
We're on UBI.
Yeah. Okay, exactly. So I just think taking away the burden and the stress of not being able to provide, doing the most, and just providing more space for people to reflect and truly do what they want to do and give people face. I mean, people love volunteering. People love giving their time. People love contributing to their society. But it's so hard to do that.
Well, and also what's wrong with just sitting on your ass? Like, that's valid. Like, it's fine. I mean, if you were, you work in the field to get your food sort of thing, and then you finish the day's work and you sit on your bum, you didn't have any books, you didn't have any TV, you didn't necessarily have any pubs. Like, it's fine. That's a valid pastime for any creature on this planet to just chill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because
we need people doing less. I have a strong feeling about this.
But also, I just think, going back to climate change, during the COVID period, when I had more space, I was doing my food shop in several spaces. I was going to the greengrocer, and then I would go to the refill place because I could, because I had time. As soon as work started again, no, I'm going to Aldi. I'm doing everything in one go.
Creating masses of landfill.
Yeah. And it was like, I realized, oh my God, if I actually had the space to be doing it, I want to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and it can be cost efficient, not all the time, but you need the time to be able to going around different places to buy things in different spaces, etc. You just cannot do that if you're working every day, you've got kids running around. I just think if we had more space, we'd be able to do the things we actually want to do. We'd be reaching better potential, like the everyday person, and they can sit on their bum as well. But I just think people are interested in their surroundings. People want to be involved. But if you're exhausted, you come home from work, just want to sit and do nothing because you're exhausted. It's very different to sitting and reflecting and then using your time.
Absolutely.
For the better of society. Yeah.
The change question. And I know we haven't really talked about any of your other roles much, and that's really my fault because I should have brought us back, but I got too excited about the film stuff. So if there were any 3 things that you could change about your work, so, you know, I would maybe try and include all of your roles here, what would they be?
There's only 3 things I could change about my work. That's a challenging question because I enjoy them all. I enjoy the people. Sometimes it's hard to criticize your work when you enjoy it and when you're very emotionally invested in it. I think the things that I would change, okay, right. One really tangible thing that I would change about my work is I would like to be surrounded by more Black people. I feel really alone and sometimes carrying the weight of conversations that we're having about trying to be more inclusive in work. And
kind of like, yeah, sure.
like,
nice empty rhetoric.
I'm like, yeah, we should be. Oh, yeah, I'll help do the work to help that happen. And, you know, because I need it, but also it's exhausting. So that's probably the biggest thing that I would change. And I am doing that, you know, I'm making more spaces for myself, to be honest. So started something, Global Majority Affinity Group, which is kind of just a collection of people who also work in the performing arts, who are of the global majority, and essentially just have informal spaces to kind of, I don't want to say bitch, but basically just kind of a safe place to kind of go, oh, you know, and they said this and they said, you know, just a space where you can kind of just talk, you know, very freely. So I'm trying to make those spaces because I don't have them necessarily in my workplace. That's been and that's also what Black Cinema Project was. It's kind of, let me make the space that I don't have. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I would change. The second thing is probably about pay. I'm permanently frustrated that in the creative industries, we're bamboozled into thinking that a low wage is a good wage and that we should be grateful for what we're getting because we're doing something that we love.
Doing something that you want to do.
Yeah.
You should be paid nothing at all. You should pay us to work.
You know how lucky you are. You could be working in Tesco. Like, I know. So it's just that, and then the mindset that it puts you in, that our ceiling of what a good wage is laughable in comparison to other sectors. So that I find permanently frustrating, and having to argue it and it's being very deeply uncomfortable. It's a really deeply uncomfortable conversation to have in any workplace, but I think particularly when you're in spaces where you love the people that you work with and you love what you do, it's really hard to complain about that. So, and you know, it was an ongoing thing when I was doing freelancing and just kind of demanding more money, essentially. And then people going, well, no, we're going to go with somebody else because we want to pay them the same rate that we've been paying this role for the last 10 years, you know? It's just, yeah, I think I'm permanently frustrated about that on behalf of all of us. Not necessarily just myself. And then, yeah, the only other thing I'd change is probably I'd love a more wider sector recognition that we need to slow down and give all of us more space to deal with the trauma of the last 3 years. And yeah, I think it'd be great if the sector all came together and went, right, okay, cool. The wider government isn't kind of providing this kind of support system. So we're just all going to slow down, or we're all just going to like collectively fight together to do less, which I know is a big ask. And I know it's more of a radical side. I think but I don't know. I just think it's exactly like you said about the motorway thing. It's unless we kind of make the motorway one lane rather than 5.
Yeah, yeah,
Cross.
yeah. I won't go off on another one of my tangents. So I think that's pretty much all my questions. I will put the union question to you quickly. So basically, just what is your experience of them? Have you ever been involved, or have you ever been asked to be in a union? Yeah, so just quickly.
I'm in the process of rejoining my union because I've made the transition from freelance to paid work. I believe in them, so I'm joining it mostly because I believe in it and I want to support the union, not because I necessarily think that I'm worried that something would go wrong, but I do recognize you should have it in place because you never know. So I feel, I'm rejoining for the purpose of, because I think we should just all be in them as standard. It should just be a part of every day. But yeah, I've not had to use a union in the past for disputes. I have directed a lot of people who are having disputes to unions. Yeah, I don't know. I think what frustrates me is what I've noticed is there's a lack, when I've been looking more at film work, it feels there's a lack of kind of union activity around film curators and programmers. There's been a lot of like public activity at the minute about programmers being sacked from jobs and not being protected, and happening at different film festivals around the world. And it kind of just strikes me that I don't really know where our collective power is. It's a weird kind of job in that it's like a really highly desirable job to be a film programmer. So it kind of feels like there's always someone willing to take the space. So I think that's part of the reason why it's quite hard to unionize. But I'm noticing, I've been trying to find information about where is this collective power? How are we all bonded together? How are we all talking to each other? And I just don't really, I'm just struggling to find it at the minute, I guess.
Yeah, I'm thinking like I don't even know who would, like, what union.
Well, it's Beck 2, I think, is the.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it Beck 2?
Yeah, Beck 2 is kind of, Beck 2 covers both the jobs that I have in theatre and film. It covers both of them, but it talks a lot about production backstage.
Because it's broadcast originally, wasn't it? Broadcast and something else. Can't remember. But all right.
Yeah, that's it. Should join. So yeah, I'm rejoining Beck 2, and but I have just been asking them questions really, because I've had some exchanges with them where I've just been trying to understand more about, okay, if I am rejoining, how is my particular role in this instance covered? Who am I connected with? You know what I mean? Just understand a bit more about that. So I'm in that process at the minute of trying to, because if it turned out Beck 2 wasn't the right one, I might go to, but there just isn't an alternative that I can see.
Yeah, so I'm going to pass it over to you. If there's anything that you want to talk about that we've not touched upon, anything, or you remember any of my questions that I forgot to ask, if there's anything that you want to chat about that we've not covered, anything that you want to kind of flag up, or over to you, basically.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I'd just like to flag up is just awareness, really, about Scalarama Leeds, because I do think it's just a brilliant initiative. Essentially, it's a collection of people who we support other people to put on their own film screenings. So it's kind of demystifying the process. What does it mean to kind of put on a film screening and license? We've got loads of resources. And there's been a huge boom in different little film clubs in the city post-lockdown, which is fantastic and really exciting. And when Scalarama Festival happens in September, it's essentially just a showcase of everyone who is putting on films. Everybody puts one on in September and we promote it as one. So I would just push people to the Scalarama Leeds socials, which is at Scalarama Leeds, and just to kind of follow their activity and support DIY screenings, because it's essentially the more wider range of people that are putting on films, the wider range of films there are available to see. It means we're not just constricted to the indie, the Hyde Park Picture House or your View, or the Leeds International Film Festival. There's a huge plethora of films in the world, and we get to, if you want to put on a film, anyone out there, you know, you can just do it. And I just think it's really exciting. I think more people should be doing it themselves. So yeah, engage with that. And then the other thing is that I'm just really excited. Obviously, the cinema is going to be reopening, which is going to be exciting. That'll be this autumn, 2022. And yeah, I would just really, really love if more people came to watch the African films that we're going to be showing, which is going to be in a range of genres. So it'll be your documentary, your kids' films, new releases, family films, horror films, you know, all the genres. But I just think I don't know, I would just love for that to do well with regards to all different types of audiences, and just for more people to expand their mind about what is available and what's life like on the African continent in all its varieties and beauty. So yeah, just plug in Cinema Africa.
Are there any like sort of uniquely African genres that you've kind of like discovered through this?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think, like I said before, the kind of political, layered activism type cinema, which is kind of centered around revolution. I think that's really exciting. That kind of complicated and nuanced cinema that's saying a lot, but it's kind of disguised in more.
Does it all end up being really academic-y terms of like, so it's kind of like periods of time, or like, you know, oh, the Burkina Faso, like you need something catchy, like a new wave, or like, is there anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, the continent's big, so every single country has its own, do you know what I mean, moments in time. Like, I feel like there are new waves in the different countries. As a continent, it feels really hard to kind of talk about it in that way because it's not a country. So I think essentially it has its own journey, actually, which is quite, you know, consistent, which is the colonized period and revolutionary, and then post-colonialism. So there is that kind of wave of activity that you can see across the board, but I don't know, beyond that, I find it hard to kind of find a commonality because it's so varied. You know what I mean? Even by region, you know, if you just look at North Africa, actually the cinema work there, Egypt, you know, just churns them out, and it's been really prevalent. It's been some excellent films for a long time. Like, so, which is very different from Southern Africa. And so, yeah, I think it's really hard to categorize in that way. Oh, what's that? There's a fun, it just occurred to me, there's a fun genre that I discovered. Oh, something pop film. God. I'm trying to think. I think it might be Kenyan. Oh God. I think I remember reading something. The filmmaker who did Rafiki. Rafiki, is that the film? My God. My brain.
The French one?
No.
No.
There's a
that rings a bell.
There's a Kenyan film which came out, which is a queer film. It did really. I've just said Rafiki. It's absolutely not that. Hang on. So basically, it's this film. It's a queer kind of love story, and essentially, it is Rafiki. Yes. So, bubblegum pop films. It's coming back to me. So essentially, the filmmaker who did this film is kind of saying we need more bubbly, light African cinema that's kind of, again, like refocus away from trauma and struggle, but just kind of like the light, bubbly kind of side of it, which I think is really interesting. And I wanted that's on my list to delve into that at some point. But yeah, so there are subgenres which is kind of coming from different countries and different regions.
Yeah.
But you know, there's so much. But that's why I'm really excited that Hyde Park Picture House has given me this platform, and the best thing about it is that it's permanent. You know, we're kind of in a rebranding at the moment, and we've got all these different film strands, from the documentary, the Creatures of the Night, which is, you know, your horror and your children's, and Cinema Africa is a part of that. So it will be a regular occurrence in the cinema. So I think for me, it's a long turn thing, and it's about building the audience and starting with kind of access points which we might be able to recognize better, and then diverting and showing these different genres, interrogating them, contextualizing them, which I think is really important. I think the introductions beforehand, I've been really enjoying just talking a little bit about that particular country's film sector and kind of, what's going on, in this place at this time that this film was made, and just giving the audience a little bit more to go on. So it's not so much you're watching it, you're comparing it against, I don't know, French New Wave, or et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it's very important that it stands alone and it's contextualized in its own world. So yeah. Yeah, I've got ideas, it's going to be happening, but it is a process, and I'm not expecting it to be perfect from the start. I'm very much aware that we need to kind of grow into it and build the audience and get a trust, that there's, because it's not going to be for everyone, but it's also, every film is so different and every genre is different, every country is different. So it's kind of just saying, give it a chance and find where is your interest within this wider African, within the continent. Do you know what I mean? Find your niche within that. Just like anything, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Thank you again to Mosa for being my guest. Thanks again to all my guests, and thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. And of course, most of all, thanks to you, my dear listener. Come back next week to hear me talk to a PR professional. So, yeah, you can hear traffic in the background because the windows are open, because it's hot. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Again, all the usual: share, rate, review, pass it around, big it up, listen to it, come on the show, help out, do us a favour, everything. Okay, that's me. Cheers, ears. Take care out there, and be kind to each other, Leeds.
If you're listening to this, I assume you have some connection to Leeds, like living here or being from here. If you're such a person in Leeds or from Leeds and you haven't done your recording for working hours yet, then don't wait. Email me now, right now. Quick, get a pen. workinghourspod@western-studios.com. If you fancy being my guest, put guest in the subject line of your email and add a short bio in the message. Stick in some suggestions of your availability and I'll send you a release form and a Zoom invite. If you'd like to be on working hours, I will need a 2-hour window for us to record in. I can record in your work time or during your downtime. I have been recording interviews for working hours for over a year on Zoom, but I can also record offline. You can appear on working hours anonymously, or you can promote yourself and or your company or brand. Cleaner or owner, what is your experience? How do you feel about work? What do you like and not like? What do you do, Leeds? Be a part of local history, have your voice heard, share your wisdom, give us the inside skinny. This is your show, Leeds, and it's all about what you make of yourself. Do you know what you're doing? If you do, then come and tell me all about it. Come on working hours, even if you don't know what you're doing. I certainly don't. Email me right now. Quick, get a pen. workinghourspod@western-studios.com. If you're allowed to do that, that is. If you're not allowed to do that, then tell me why. If you and your business aren't ashamed of what you do, then let's hear all about it. What good are you doing the rest of us? Are you socially useful? Am I? Is this? Send your feedback, questions, comments, and queries right now to workinghourspod@western-studios.com. What is happening, Leeds? Find out by following this show on Twitter @WorkingHours3 and on Instagram @WorkingHoursPodLeeds to find out when new episodes are going to be released, or just use the hashtag #WorkingHoursPodLeeds on either of those sites to find me. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/Western_Studios_Leeds. I'm also on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IN/Simon-Treen. Treen is TREEN. Or you can go to my company page, which is linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. If you want to make a podcast in Leeds, whether it's for a cause, a publicity campaign, a product promotion, or your own passion project, then get in touch with me. Western Studios for support, advice, and guidance on anything podcasts. At Western Studios, you work with a real life loiner who is actually in Leeds, who you can actually work with on making podcast content. So don't wade through articles and videos and podcasts about how to make podcasts. Just get on with it. Western Studios can make your podcast with you or even for you. Western Studios can take on your podcast's boring, time-consuming and painful admin, recording, editing, transcription, whatever. Tell me about it. I feel your pain. For a charge, I'll share it. Writers, what are you doing with your lives? Hopefully you're writing. Well, I know there are listeners out there who want to hear great original writing performed as audio content and made in Leeds. How do I know this? Because I'm one of them. Help me make Muck for Brass, a series of short stories, poems, performers, whatever, all published as podcast content. Is your work arty, salacious, pulpy, strange? Good. I want to make it a podcast. I get practice making the show, and you get a finished, performed, and published version of your writing. Businesses, campaigns, brands, got an inkling that you'd like a podcast but don't know where to start? Hit me up at Make My Podcast at western-studios.com and we'll start making your podcast straight away. The first hour of arranged consultation and pre-production time is free. So what do you have to lose? And what are you waiting for? Save yourself the hassle and the headache and make your podcast with a Leeds-based, in real life podcast producer. That's me, Western Studios Leeds. Once again, please let Working Hours get big and strong by joining its Patreon. Support Working Hours by becoming a champion on Patreon for £1 a month. You can inspire me and motivate me with a membership and maybe one day even be helping to cover all my costs. You can chat to me there and see me do a monthly live stream where, again, you can chat to me all about the show and, God, do I need to find someone to actively share this project with? Go to patreon.com/workinghoursepod right now and sign up, please. And or go to Ko-fi, that's ko-fi.com/working hours and join me there for £1 a month and get access to the Working Hours Discord and chat to me there. I will be putting up additional material on Ko-fi once there are any members there. Please do remember to like, share, follow and subscribe to this show. Every little bit helps. Tell your gran, tell your housekeeper, tell your gardener, tell your parole officer, tell your boss, tell Leeds, and I'll see thee next time, our kid. Working Hours is presented, edited and recorded by Simon Treem for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org.